Good morning and welcome to Kunsampai Julian. I'm glad to have you join us today, and we're glad to present a teaching by Jetsunma Ahkon. This teaching this morning is entitled What It Means to Be Buddha. So we will begin.
Today's teaching has to do with understanding what it means to be a Buddha. The reason for this teaching is that many new students that come to these teachings and that are first acquainted with the Buddha Dharma clearly have some doubts, and that's natural. And in fact, the Buddha teaches us that we should evaluate a path that we are intending to engage upon very carefully and be free of doubt, that we should use our intellect and use our mind to see whether the path is not meaningful and reasonable, and to see, of course, we can't know fully if it's reasonable in that we ourselves are not enlightened and we don't know how to understand enlightenment. So in that sense, we can't intellectually examine enlightenment. It will lead us to nothing, since we ourselves have never tasted it. Yet, what we can examine is whether or not the path has come to us from a source that can know enlightenment, whether or not the path has come to us from a source that is untainted and pure, and whether or not the path is attainable to us, that is to say, reachable to us through means that are meaningful to us. An example of that would be that if there were such a path and it came from a pure source and was authentic and was untainted, but, for instance, was not in our language, and we had no way to learn that language, then the path would not be reasonably attainable by us, and so we would have to think of something else to do. So these things are ways in which we have to examine. And the Buddha teaches us that we should go through that process. And there are many aspects of the Buddha's teachings that we can examine for ourselves. For instance, we can examine whether there is truth to the Buddha's statement about that all of cyclic existence, that is to say, the cycle of death and rebirth, are pervaded with suffering in one form or another, such as, for instance, the suffering of suffering, which is to say the actual discomfort that one feels when there is suffering. For instance, if one were to break one's leg, there would be suffering with that, or if one were to be sick, there is suffering with that. There is also the suffering of change, and that is that even while one may be feeling extremely well and may find a great deal of happiness, and even for some periods of time extreme joy, the suffering of change eventually will be seen in that the particular circumstance that has brought us that joy will in some way change or terminate. If one is, and we all know, we've seen this happen in our lives, that we can be feeling particularly up and particularly good, but that mood or that feeling or the circumstance that created that instance are not dependable. They do change, and one's feelings, one's attitude change from day to day, if not moment to moment. And even if we go through long periods of great happiness, eventually that happiness, the factors that create that happiness or our reaction to those factors will change somehow. And even in terms of happiness that we might find in a relationship, that happiness, of course, is subject to change in that the relationship will either terminate or change, or one of the partners eventually, if nothing else happens, will leave the physical plane and be out of touch with the other. So these things all occur. And then, of course, there is the suffering that is inherent in all phenomenal existence. That is the suffering that pertains to whatever particular realm of cyclic existence one is in, such as old age, sickness, and death for the human realm, and rifts and layoffs and taxes and, you know, all those things. And the suffering also that is inherent in form, in that form has a beginning and therefore has an ending as well. There is no, it is not a dependable format, you see, and that within the realm of cyclic existence there is simply that. Everything is cyclic. Everything continually changes and reinvents itself. So these sufferings do exist. And having understood that for oneself, one then wishes to become a Buddha, in that we are told a Buddha is no longer compelled by those very forces that I have just described. A Buddha is no longer subject to the suffering that is inherent within these realms. And furthermore, a Buddha is able to help others who are victimized by these forms of suffering. A Buddha is able to be of tremendous benefit where we as ordinary people cannot be of much benefit. A Buddha is able to lift others out of cyclic existence by appearing in the world and offering the path by which others can attain. So these things being the case, we think that perhaps we would like to turn away from cyclic existence and look toward enlightenment or awakening or becoming a Buddha in order to be free of these things and in order to be of benefit to sentient beings. So what does that mean? Main fears seem to have when they first come to the path is they think that in order to be a Buddha, one has to be extremely weird. And they have this idea that when one becomes a Buddha, or at least when one becomes an awakening being called a bodhisattva, and moving toward being a Buddha, that one has to change in some radical way, even in terms of one's appearance. The idea being that a Buddha should perhaps wear very noble spiritual clothing and dress out of sync with the rest of the world and not look very fashionable, horror upon horror. And perhaps the personality would take on some peculiarly obnoxious traits. I've had it, and I'm not making this up. I'm talking about, these are things that people have said to me. They feel that to be a Buddha, one would have to be so pure, but pure not in an inner way to the depth of one's being, but the kind of pure one draws up one's nose, you see, and draws up one's lips, and thinks that everything is not quite good enough, and perhaps can never participate in understanding life in any ordinary way again, that suddenly one couldn't do that and couldn't do that and couldn't do that, that kind of almost persnickety attitude about life. And furthermore, these are some of the other ideas that have been given to me, is that in order to become a Buddha, one would have to be very blissy, that one would have to be constantly blissed out, with the eyes rolled ever heavenward. That's a different religion, actually, but people still think that. Rolled ever heavenward, and I'm having trouble after the Schwarzenegger thing, it really. tied my tongue. And that one would have to sit, always in samadhi, and the positions of one's body would be very different from others. Others would be walking around, and Buddhas would be like that. We have a lot of baggage about this idea. And of course we must understand the source of that baggage. That baggage comes from being raised in a materialistic society where we are told that success for men is go get 'em. Success is make lots of money, be a great guy, go get 'em, 2 chickens in every pot, and get yourself a fancy car. And that's really what success is all about. That's only after you've completed the traditional football in your early years. And as a woman, you get to marry one. And so these are the ideas that we are brought up with, thinking that this is what's important. So when we hear that perhaps in order to live very spiritually, all of that has to change, we become extremely frightened. And we make up these ideas about how we're going to look and how differently from our programming. It gets real scary. So what I would like to do is clarify some of that and perhaps talk a little bit about what it really means to be a Buddha. Not that I myself have any personal experience. Please do not think that I am claiming to have any personal experience, but rather I am teaching you something that is written in the teachings. And I am describing to you characteristics that are described, that pertain to the Buddha and are described about the Buddha. So these are some things that you can possibly know. In order to antidote the idea, and there is another idea that I would like to bring out at this time, the idea being that Buddhas are just 2 steps away from blithering idiots. Meaning that, and I don't mean this disrespectfully because in fact it isn't true, but we have this idea that one is so profoundly composed in samadhi that as a Buddha one cannot see even one's environment, that one cannot tell what the environment is, that in fact if let loose on the streets, Buddhas would clearly bump into moving taxis, or they would just have no understanding of what the world is about and would have to be led around and kept very carefully. This also is a falsehood. In order to clarify and antidote these falsehoods, I would like to describe 2 important characteristics of the Buddha. One characteristic of the Buddha is an absence of conceptualization. A very important quality, a most important quality, in that according to the Buddha's teaching, all suffering that we experience has to do with our conceptualization. And it has to do with desire, which is at its root a concept. According to the teaching, that we perceive our environment, such as this glass of water, is not the problem. One can perceive a glass of water and do so with enlightened intention and from an enlightened perspective and know its true nature and at the same time know its qualities as physical manifestation, cold, wet, in a clear glass, even knowing how it tastes. Where suffering comes in and where sentient beings, ordinary sentient beings, actually take off is at the point where they cannot purely perceive this phenomena, but must perceive it with attraction, repulsion, or neutrality, desire. We do not know how to perceive a glass of water without perceiving also how we remember it tasting, and from that point deciding if we want it or do not want it. Every piece of phenomena that we experience in that way, we experience with the modification of attraction and repulsion. Try it on your own. If you can be sensitive to yourself. Some people are not very sensitive to themselves and they really do not know what they feel. But if you can be sensitive to yourself and courageous enough to face this, examine for yourself. Look for the first time at a cool glass of water. Have someone just stick it right in your face and see what happens. You'll salivate. You'll do something. If you look closely at yourself, you'll see that, in fact, you are reacting toward that glass of water with something akin to desire, or the flip side of desire, which is essentially the same as desire, repulsion, or neutrality, which is where you already decided that you don't either want it or not want it. You just kind of, so what about it? But they all relate to desire. As a Buddha, however, we are free from these conceptualizations when we attain Buddhahood. That is to say, we are able to perceive phenomena, but we do not exaggerate phenomena with the process of conceptualization. What is what it is suchness, and it has no exaggerated and artificial meaning. Sentient beings spend the entirety of their existence, in fact, the entire experience of their continuum, consists of the exaggeration of phenomena and of the reaction toward phenomena, and thereby the artificial construction associated with that exaggeration. That is our experience. It takes a good piece of work, some extended effort, and a great deal of courage to examine the content of our lives, to see for ourselves that, in fact, we are experiencing this continuum of exaggeration. It's very, very hard to do. Very, very hard to see it, but if we examine faithfully, we will see that this is, in fact, the case. The Buddha, however, has no such fault, and we call this a fault because it is an obstacle. The involvement in conceptualization results in the fixation on the process of conceptualization, and that fixation results in the experience of continuum. Continuing phenomena, having a connection or a link one from the other, and prevents the pure experience of one's own primordial wisdom nature, that view which rests and resides spontaneously and purely in uncontrived experience. It prevents that pure knowing. That knowing which is the same as awakening to one's own true nature, as awakening to the primordial wisdom state. That knowing which the Buddha described when being asked about himself said simply, "I am awake." So conceptualization prevents that process. It is problematic because it occludes that view, in the same way that covering a diamond with mud or concrete will occlude the quality of the diamond, the light of the diamond, the purity of the diamond. One will, in essence, not know that a diamond is beneath the mud. And that, of course, conceptualization can be likened to the mud that covers the diamond. The second quality that the Buddha has is discriminating wisdom. Discriminating wisdom can be described as the ability to discriminate, that is, to see, even as we see, to see a napkin, to see a glass, to see rice, to see the color red, to discriminate these things, but to discriminate them in such a way that they are simply discriminated. With that quality of discriminating wisdom, the Buddha has no absence of the ability to function from a relative point of view. in essence, to counteract the idea that a Buddha might very easily walk out into the street and be hit by a car because he was absorbed in samadhi. In fact, the opposite is true. The Buddha can remain completely absorbed in samadhi and yet interact on a level that the beings around the Buddha could relate to and could actually, certainly, very easily recognize a taxi and even get into it. Discriminating wisdom is there, the ability to discriminate between certain kinds of phenomena. But wisdom is also one of the words described in that phrase. And wisdom here means that while one can discriminate phenomena, one also knows the nature of that phenomena. That is to say, because of the freedom from conceptualization, because of the lack of conceptualization, one also understands the empty, primordial nature of that phenomena that is not lost and not occluded, not somehow left behind due to the fixation on conceptualization. As a Buddha, therefore, phenomena is understood. In fact, it is said that the Buddha understands all cause and effect relationships, even beyond phenomena. We actually take great pride in ourselves, thinking that we're so sophisticated in the world, and we couldn't possibly give our lives to a spiritual path. We couldn't possibly be spiritual, because then we'd become sort of perhaps in some strange way, or maybe inept, or maybe we'd become so blissed out that we couldn't function. That's really the idea that we have. But in fact, the opposite is true when you stop to think that as an ordinary sentient being, we do not understand what cause and effect factors, what causative factors have brought us to this present moment. We have no understanding of that. Limited understanding. Okay, let's grant each other that. We know that we were born, either male or female. We know that we have certain parenting and certain genetics, and these are causative factors. At least they seem to be. And we think as well that because we put on the clothing that we have now, that's why we look as we do at this present moment. We have that kind of limited understanding, limited only by the present day experience that we can remember we have. But it is said about the Buddha, about an enlightened one, not just the historical Buddha, but about any Buddha, any enlightened one, that they can look at the present moment that you are experiencing, see you as you are now, and understand all of the cause and effect relationships, all of the causative factors that brought you to this moment. And furthermore, having the wisdom of the three times, past, present, and future, can also understand completely all of the factors influencing you at this present moment, which even we do not, because we don't know ourselves very well. And then can go on to understand all of the probable realities that we will experience, all of the probable cause and effect relationships that we will move through in the future. That's a piece of sophistication, if you ask me. I can't do it. You can't do it. That's pretty sophisticated. And yet we applaud ourselves thinking we're so swift because we can get in a taxi without getting hit most of the time. So these ideas that we have about what it means to be spiritual are erroneous. And in fact, bringing that down to practicality, when people first enter onto the path, they really ask questions. They do so honestly with pure intention, such as, well, do I have to dress a certain way now? Or are there certain things I can't do anymore? Is it okay to see a movie? Is it okay to go dancing? Is it okay to live a life as other people live? Do I have to feel a certain way, and do I have to stop feeling other ways? The practical advice on such matters is that you should start now where you are. It's very sensible advice. For you to think that you are going to start somewhere else other than where you are is really argues with the idea that you have that you're very sophisticated about phenomena. Because it simply won't work. It's just not going to happen. You must start exactly where you are, and of course you are starting as who you are. People say to me, well, should I then stop believing in self-nature as being inherently real? Meaning, should I just stop thinking that I'm like a person? Well, all right. How can I even answer that? The answer is that you are starting where you are. And you believe yourself to be a person, and that's how one of the causative factors that creates your life as it is now. But that's where it is, and that's where you are. So you start. And you start by doing your practice. There will be some things that gradually, over a period of time, will change in you. For instance, some of you may be very much drawn to violent movies. And as you practice, you may find that those things become offensive to you. And some of you may think at this time that it's okay to do professional, what do they call that, professional stealing, where it's okay to take paper clips from your office, and it's okay to take loose leaf binders from your office and to borrow a little bit of this from Uncle Sam, and that kind of thing that everybody seems to engage in and seems to be pretty much culturally sanctified. That may be okay for you now, but you may or may not, depending on your practice, find that that becomes simply undoable, that you can no longer do that. At any rate, the advice on a very gut level that I might give you is to be natural. To force yourself into a mold that you're not ready for is stupid. On the other hand, to continue being the way you think you are because you demand to be an individual is just as stupid. Just relax and try not to be a heavy breather. Now, I don't know that that's written anywhere in the text, but that's my gut advice to you. I think it's much less important whether, as a practitioner, you wear Dharma clothing and act like a Dharma person and do the Dharma dance and sing the Dharma song, than it is that you genuinely practice from the heart. I think it's less important what you wear as to what you clothe yourself with in terms of your own intentions. I think it's less important what you take into your mouth than it is what you put out of your mouth. These are things that I think are important. However, this is only one perspective. Another very foundational perspective that one has is that eventually one might wish to take robes, as these students did, and to become a renunciate, a monk or a nun. This is your choice. This is not the only way to practice the Buddha Dharma. I am not either a monk or a nun. But it is a way, and it works. It depends on what comes from your heart. And however you practice is how you practice, because that's who you are. And particularly, that's your karma. You have the path, and like the Buddha said, I have given you the path. Now it's up to you to work out your own salvation. And when that was said, that wasn't mean you're on your own, kid. That didn't mean you're on your own and there's no one to help you. Obviously there's help. But it means you get to work it out. So it also means what I say week after week after week, which is the ball is in your court. How you practice is how you practice, and accordingly you will have results. If you practice mindlessly, you'll have very little result. If you practice deeply from the heart, you will have good result. If you practice for the approval of others, or because you think it's a good thing to do, then you'll have minimal result. If you practice because you truly see the faults of cyclic existence, and with faith and devotion wish to turn away from that, moving toward enlightenment in order to be of benefit to sentient beings, you will have good results. So accordingly, you are in the driver's seat. And please remove from your mind all of these crazy misconceptions that we have about what it means to be a Buddha and what it means to be enlightened and what it means to be spiritual. And please don't let me ever see, I hope I never see any of you dressing up to play the part of a spiritual one without having the heart of a spiritual one. In closing, there is a wonderful series of stories about a crazy yogi type Lama in our tradition who is called Drupa Kunli. And he had wonderful stories of crazy, wild things that he did. He made me look pale, and I'm not exactly a quiet girl. And he made just about everybody I know look pale. And his life was very exciting. He had lots of consorts and lots of instances that were extraordinary. You can read about him. I believe the book is in the gift store. But no one understands him because they think that what he did externally was really what he was all about. That somehow if you were a crazy enough yogi, that you could get enlightened. And that's not true. My root guru, His Holiness Pena Rinpoche, laughed when we told this story of how everybody wants to be like Drupa Kunli in America. Everybody wants to be the crazy yogi type. And said, yeah, sounds like a good idea. He said, but the problem is, in order to be like Drupa Kunli, you have to have the heart and mind of Drupa Kunli. And we don't have that yet. He has such renunciation that all phenomena he engaged in had no attachment with it. He had such purity that every intention was to benefit others and was never selfish. And yet he was very much involved in cyclic existence. And when the story came out from the wash to the rinse, it turned out that he was a great benefit to many, many sentient beings. And that's where the proof is in the pudding. In the end, the story will tell. Did we fool around just to fool around? Or did we really make a difference? That's where the truth is. Drupa Kunli, by the way, was considered to be an enlightened one, a Buddha. And if he were alive in this present day, in this present time, I think we could safely say that he could catch a cab. At any rate, thank you very much for attending today. I really do appreciate your company, and as always, very much I'm glad to see you here and hope that you continue to come and spend time with us.
Thank you so much for joining us today. As always, we enjoy your company, and we're glad that you come and share these teachings with us every week. They are available to you. We show them on Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m. as well as Sundays at 11 a.m., both on YouTube. And you can get there because you're here now, so that's great. We also offer a meditation on YouTube on Saturday and Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. and that's led by one of our nuns, and is a basic breathing meditation. And we hope that you can come and join with us when everything opens up again, and we're all back to kind of where we might have been, or maybe not, or maybe we're somewhere else. Hopefully we'll have classes in person, but right now they're all online, and so we hope you join us there. In addition, we offer Medicine Buddha on Facebook every evening at 7 p.m. It's a short practice with the teachings in English, and we hope that that's of benefit. Please come, enjoy, and bring your prayers. Not just for all those that you wish prayers for, which everyone will join in, but also for those for whom they need prayers as well. Daily, we offer a soak or feast offering ceremony here at the temple. It's Monday through Fridays, generally at 5 p.m., Saturdays at noon, and Sundays at 2. We follow the lunar calendar of the Tibetans, and so Tuesday, I believe, is Rinpoche Day. And that means that the soak will be at 7:30 p.m. and will be a longer practice. So join us for that. And if you wish, those are on Zoom, and the calendar is on our website. Our website is tara.org, and you can go there and learn more about us, as well as go to the page under Meditate. What does it say? Meditate, study, pray. Under that section, you can find a calendar, and you can also watch these webcasts live. But the calendar allows you to click on the event that's happening and find out where it is, what if there's any passwords or links that you need to know, and also the link to the practice that we'll be doing so that you can feel right at home and join right in, and we hope you do. So that's our kind of regular run. This next upcoming month, we're going to have a meditation challenge on social media, on Facebook and Instagram, on the KPC pages. They're going to be doing sort of a day-by-day commit to 5 minutes of meditating. And you can find out more about that on tara.org, but also on Facebook and Instagram, where it's primarily located. It's being sort of honchoed by our social media team, and they're pretty active on those two venues. So do come and join us. And if you aren't active on social media, but you want to join in anyway, it's also on tara.org. So you can go find that meditation challenge, and we will be posting all the things they post on there so that you can join in. And we, again, hope you do. Should you want to come out to visit the temple right now, please, you are always welcome outside. And it's open from dawn to dusk. Inside is still currently closed. We're hoping that won't last too much longer. But we had kind of a lot of people were exposed to COVID, so we wanted to make sure you were all safe. And so that is that's why the inside is currently closed. Again, outside, all open during the day. All year, welcome every day, any day, dawn to dusk. Should you want to make an offering to Jetsunma, having received a teaching from her, you can do that on her PayPal page or account. What am I thinking? Which is jetsumagift@gmail.com. That's in the chat. Jetsumagift, all one word, @gmail.com, and you can send that to her through PayPal and make a stronger connection should you wish to do so. As always, we appreciate you being here. Your prayers are always welcome. You can put those up again on the website, and you know that they will be read in practices, and that they will be taken to heart by all the practitioners here. And so make use of it. We're here for you. We're here, contact us anytime you want at kpc@tara.org, and we will do our best to answer your questions and be there for you. So I hope to see you next week. Hope to see you soon. And please be safe and be well. Happy Lunar New Year. There's lots of them happening this year. We're in the new one of the Asians in general, and the Tibetan one comes up in next month, later in February. So, oh boy, 3 New Years this year. So enjoy them all. See you soon.